Wikipedia.
Okay. Humility is the quality of being humble. Dictionary definitions accentuate humility as a low self-regard and sense of unworthiness. In a religious context, humility can mean a recognition of self in relation to a deity, i.e. God, or deities, and a subsequent submission to said deity as a member of that religion. Outside of a religious context, humility is defined as being unself, a liberation from consciousness of self, a form of temperance that is neither having pride or haughtiness, nor indulging in self-deprecation. Humility is an outward expression of an appropriate inner or self-regard and is contrasted with humiliation, which is an imposition often external of shame upon a person. Humility may be misappropriated as an ability to suffer humiliation through self-denouncements, which in itself remain focused on self rather than low self-focus. Humility is in various interpretations is widely seen as a virtue which centers on low self-preoccupation or unwillingness to put oneself forward. So it is in many religious and philosophical traditions in contrast with narcissism, hubris, and other forms of pride, and is an idealistic and rare interested construct that has an extrinsic side.
Okay, so any comments about that? We know I think the main part here, humility is an outward expression of an inner or self-regard and is contrasted with humiliation, which is an imposition of shame upon a person. So when they're talking about walking humbly, any comments? What is walking humbly?
It's the opposite, according to that, of narcissism. We know one person who's very narcissistic and he doesn't walk humbly. So it's the opposite of that, with all things being about me and mine and that sort of thing. I think humbly is more, you don't put the spotlight on yourself. You're doing for others.
I think so. Let's put that down. Spotlight's not on yourself.
You want me to write for you?
If you. In other words, my writing is really bad.
No, you can teach and I can write.
Okay, you could do that. Thank you, Guy.
For once, I don't have to do it.
John, I'm not sure when she read it, but in your reading there was the key word for me stuck out was with. And the reason it is that God isn't like some general or something, and you follow his dictum. It's with. So it's more, God is all around us, but God is also inside us. And if we can put the two together, we become, as Wiley would say, well, I don't know if he would say it, but he did say it once, that made the perfect man, and the only one that he knows of is Jesus. But it's
all right.
To Chip's point, and you can write this down. There's two parts to that. It doesn't just say walk humbly, but it says walk humbly with God. To that with point. And yes.
Can I provide some scriptural context for the with?
Mm-hmm.
There's a few different verses in the Gospels. So, like for example, when Jesus is washing his disciples' feet, and it says, "I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, and also you shall wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should also do as I have done for you." And then we also see in Philippians chapter 2, and it's talking about Christ, and it says, "Instead, he emptied himself by assuming the form of a servant and taking on the likeness of humanity. And when he had come as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even to death on the cross.
So obedient. Obedient to the point of death?
The point of that is, to my mind anyway, is that it's about the real power is in serving, not in being served, which is totally, the last shall be first, first shall be last. There's a lot of paradox in the Bible, and that's part of that. When we take a quote, how often do you hear a quote taken out of the Bible that says, do this or do that, and people do it, and it's, wait a minute, that's not what Christianity is about. So let's go to that. Can somebody read, let's say, that was verse 8. Let's start reading, where does this come from, this beautiful saying in Micah? Let's start with chapter 6. You want to read that, Carl? I mean, verse 6 in chapter 8. Second column there.
Chapter 6, you mean?
No.
Chapter 6, verse 8, I
Yeah,
think he said.
yeah, verse 6. Go to verse 6.
Oh,
That happens before verse 8.
With what shall I come before the Lord and bow before God Most High? Shall I come before him with holocausts, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with myriad streams of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my crime, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Keep going.
No, did you read all the way up to 8? To verse 8?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So what has happened? What does Jesus say about that? How does Jesus talk about Micah's thing here? So what do you hear in that? Do you make a big show? You know, I come to church every Sunday. Any comments here on this? Or is that just pretty? Do we all have a same understanding?
Making a big show is an error on the part of a lot of people. It's not about making a big show. It's not about making big contributions. It's not, and it's, you know, that's even in the Bible where Jesus talked about the wealthy man who was exclaiming his gifts and how wealthy he was. That's not what, that's not wealthy.
Right.
The whole Old Testament was based on the Old Testament, the Jewish life. The Israelites and the writings were based on the concept of sacrificial system. And so their worship was to bring animals in to be sacrificed. So some translations where she's read Holocaust as burnt offerings.
Yes.
And so
Oh, that's not the Holocaust we think of in.
right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so this was the outward appearance that was present in that sacrificial system. And so I think that the message here is that we're beginning to look towards the New Testament concept of inward reflection and ownership and because Christ became the sacrifice.
Okay. The next question I had here. So what does Jesus tell us about this idea of walking humbly with God? If you go to Matthew chapter 6. It's pretty in Matthew's testimony here. Jesus is pretty specific about just the discussion we just had about walking humbly. chapter 6, Matthew says, be on guard against, or at least this is what Jesus is saying, be on guard against performing religious acts for people to see. Otherwise, expect no recompense from your heavenly Father. When you give alms, for example, do not blow a horn before you in synagogues and streets like hypocrites looking for applause. You can be sure of this much, they are already repaid. In giving alms, you are not to let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Keep your deeds of mercy secret, and we're talking about doing mercy and justice. Keep them secret, and your Father who sees in secret will repay you. When you are praying, do not behave like the hypocrites who love to stand and pray in synagogues or on street corners in order to be noticed. I give you my word, they are already repaid. I'm going, let's see. I want to skip a little bit rather than read the whole thing. Then your Father who sees what no man sees will repay you. In your prayer, do not rattle on like the pagans. They think they will win a hearing by the sheer multiplication of words. And I pause there because I think about what's happening in our society today. Do not imitate them. Your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. And this is how you are to pray. And he talks about, again, the Our Father. So
is one of the things turning toward lessons in the New Testament?
Well, according to Matthew, Jesus also says that don't make a show of your goodness. And so why should that be important? You want to read, again, I talk about how when you take something out of time, Carla read the 2 verses before. Sassy, you want to read the 2 verses after that?
Yeah.
And Micah? I hope I didn't lose my place. I hope I did. I pulled it out.
And while I'm flipping there, I'd like to make the point. I think it also really boils down to your intention. And God truly knows the intentions of one's heart. And He knows whether you're doing it to check off boxes or whether you're doing it for the attention. And that was something I had to learn, I guess, becoming a young adult, is not just doing stuff so it's done, but doing it because I want to grow in closeness with God. Because God's not going to look at my checklist and make sure I filled all these things,
John.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if this is called an exception to what we're talking about right now, but the early Christians and the Gnostics, they would meet in each other's houses, as you know, because they were so persecuted. But they would also be hung upside down and other things. And that was cheered on by the crowd and seen. So they were showing basically their devotion, but it's really a whole other subject.
There's the story.
But it was a showing of their devotion, hoping that they could turn a few. What did you say?
Yes. Well, there's the story too about Peter when they were going to crucify him. Finally, that he actually asked to be crucified upside down because he didn't want to be crucified like Jesus. Again, this idea of humility. It's, I don't want my crucifixion to be a show about me. And, we even have in the New Testament, Paul, and there was something going on, and Paul talks about are you my disciple or Barnabas' disciple or this person's disciple? No, it's about, again, to Shasta's point that she just made, that about who.
That's your intention.
Yeah, again, your intention. Can you read the next few verses?
Yes. The voice of the Lord calls out to the city, and it is wise to fear your name. Pay attention to the rod and the one who ordained it. And there still the treasures of wickedness and the accused, short measure in the house of the wicked. Did I excuse the wicked scales or the bags of deceptive weights?
It's funny. I had something here about, no, I can't find it. Because I wrote, they were talking about oh, here it is. It's verse 16. This is what I'm coming to. We talked about your intention. I'm sorry, Shasta. It's verse 16.
Let's see.
You have kept the decrees of Omri and all the works of the house of Ahab, and you have walked in their counsels. Therefore I will deliver you up to ruin, and your citizens to derision, and you shall bear the reproach of the nations. And I mentioned a minute ago about how does it talk about our society today. Somebody could maybe read that about Omri and Ahab.
Oh, okay. Both of these?
Yes. Now, go ahead.
Wow.
Well, Omri is really the only one. Ahab is a descendant, but they're
Okay. Omri was in the 9th century BC, was, according to the Hebrew Bible, the 6th king of Israel. He was a successful military campaigner who extended the northern kingdom of Israel. Other monarchs from the house of Omri are Ahab. Okay.
the rest. You can skip all of it.
Raza, Joram, and Athaliah.
Yeah.
Like his predecessor, King Zimri, who ruled for only 7 days, Omri is the second king mentioned in the Bible without a statement of his tribal origin. One possibility, though unproven, is that he was the tribe of Ishar. Nothing is said in Scripture about the lineage of Omri. His name may be Amorite, Arabic, or Hebrew in origin. Omri is credited with the construction of Samaria and Samaria, and establishing it as his capital. Although the Bible is silent about other actions taken during his reign, he is described as doing more evil than all the kings who preceded him. An alternative modern hypothesis maintains that as founder of the house of Omri, an Israelite royal house, his kingdom formed the first state in the land of Israel, and that the kingdom of Judah only achieved statehood later. Extra-biblical sources such as Misha Steele and the Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser III.
I should have underlined the important stuff that's in there.
Is also mentioned his name. However, in the case of the Black Obelisk, the reference is to the dynasty named for Omri rather than to Omri himself. A minor thesis argued by Thomas Thompson and Niels Peter Limerick, anyway, suggests suggests that Omri may be a dynastic name indicating the apical founder of the kingdom of Israel, rather than one denoting an actual historical king. Okay. King of northern Israel.
Okay. What are the, we're not expected to know all this stuff.
Good.
What's the important part you got out of that, Margaret?
That he was the king of Israel.
Okay, he was the first dynastic king of Israel, the northern kingdom, as opposed to Judah, the southern kingdom.
And his successor was Ahab.
Yeah, and what else does it say about that king? He was, what kind of stuff did he do? He was a campaigner, so he was able to consolidate the religious, and it was a religious kingdom. It was about keeping the promise that the Lord made to Abraham. Okay, and what does it say about him as a person?
It says he's a successful military campaigner who extended the northern kingdom of Israel.
He doesn't say something about what kind of person he was, like he was not a good person, was he?
He's described as doing more evil than all the kings who preceded him.
Okay. Okay, now, you can read about Ahab, and it's the same thing. I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay.
About what does it mean in today's society, how we are not walking humbly. This is telling us what we shouldn't do right here.
Please do.
He's worn out.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
my tongue is like tied in knots.
Yeah, well, see, that part is not important.
All right. Good Lord.
Yeah. Welcome to my world.
Ahab was the 7th king of Israel, the son and successor of King Omri, and the husband of Jezebel of Sidon.
Side.
According to the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible presents Ahab as a wicked king. So Omri's successors weren't very nice, particularly for condoning Jezebel's influence on religious policies and his principal role behind Naboth's arbitrary execution. The existence of Ahab is historically supported outside the Bible. Shalmaneser III of Assyria documented in 853 BC that he defeated an alliance of a dozen kings in the Battle of Karkar. One of these was Ahab. He is also mentioned on the inscriptions of the Misha Stele. Like I know what I'm saying. Ahab
That's not the important stuff, so it doesn't matter.
Ahab became king of Israel in the 38th year of King Asa of Judah and reigned for 22 years according to Kings, 1 Kings. William F. Albright dated his reign to 869 to 850 BC, while Edwin R. Thiele offered the dates 874 to 853. Most recently, Michael Coogan has dated Ahab's reign 871 to 852. It's all in the same general years, BC. And that's it. Omni was his father.
Go ahead, Pam.
I'm going to show my biblical ignorance here, but you're talking about the southern kings and the northern kings.
Well, they're the kingdoms.
Yeah.
Israel
Did
and...
What was their relationship with each other? It said the northern king added to, the kingdom with his campaign, said he was successful. But did they clash?
My understanding was they had the separation after David.
Oh.
Wasn't that when the kingdoms got separated? The 10 northern tribes and the southern tribes, which was basically, I believe, Benjamin and Judah were the only two in the southern part of the Fertile Crescent from the people that came with Moses into the Promised Land. So what does that have? What does that mean for today? This, if it says,
Well, it didn't seem like they walked humbly.
no, and so that's where I'm coming to. So what happens?
I don't care about who.
What's going to happen if you claim to be following the word of Jesus and you're making a big show of it and you're doing this and when we are lucky in this country to have some say in what goes on in our leaders. And we have leaders that profess to be of family values. Look how I live my life. I go to church. I do this. I do this. That person is a sinner. That person is a sinner. And what does Micah say is going to happen to us as a nation if we keep following this stuff? What's the Lord really going to do to us? I will deliver you up to ruin, and your citizens to derision, and you shall bear the reproach of the nations. And again, we were talking the last couple of classes about how we have some responsibility to get involved, even if it's on a small way, but not to set aside. So any comments on that? I don't want to be the only one talking.
The only, this is maybe, you know how I go off. But the only present that I can think of, at least in this century, that it is, I'll use the word godly, Jimmy Carter. And he couldn't do anything because everybody else, Republicans especially, said this guy just isn't strong enough. But ever since then,
the point is that at the time you had Jerusalem and you had Samaria, and is it any wonder today that the destruction that came down upon Israel and eventually onto Jerusalem and Judea too, it took a little longer, but it happened. And again, we just talked about what in Matthew 6, what Jesus said about professing to be religious and not actually, what do you actually do? In Luke 14, verse 8, if I can find it. I apologize. I'm not used to doing this stuff. Luke. Verse 8. And I have written some of these wrong before, and I hope I got this one as right. Jesus is talking to the people, and he says, when you're invited by someone to a wedding party, do not sit in the place of honor in case some greater dignitary has been invited. then the host might come and say to you, make room for this man, and you would have to proceed shamefully to the lowest place. What you should do when you have been invited is go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host approaches he will say, my friend, come up higher. This will win you the esteem of your fellow guests. For everyone who exalts himself shall be humbled, and he who humbles himself shall be exalted. Now that's on a person basis that Jesus taught me. If we talk out a little larger, what can we say about our nation on the world stage today? And where are we headed? No, I mean,
scary.
I will give you one little picture, and I don't know how many of you have seen this, but after Trump was elected president, and he went to this, I think it was in Helsinki, this conference, and the president of one of the Balkan countries, I think it was Montenegro, and Trump goes in there and pushes him aside and jumps to the first place.
Really?
Yes, he did, yes.
I saw it.
I saw that.
So that's, you know,
Oh, and when he
That's-
was in England, he walked in front of.
In front of him.
oh, in front of the Queen?
Yeah.
On inauguration day, Bill Bonner had to open the door for his wife. He didn't. Well, he started day one, because on inauguration day, when he was getting in the car, he didn't even open the door for Melania, the Obamas did. Well, you know, there is that, I am it and this is it, you know, anything. And it has been that from day one, for that whole, and then greeted that whole thing of that constant, everything you did has to be recognized. Anytime you spoke, the red carpet, the audience, everything. And I've been so acclimated to that, so that now every time I see Biden, I'm looking for that. I don't see that. That's how you get used to that. But I do remember that.
See, that's a narcissistic move. And we saw it all the time. We continue to see it.
Yes,
And it's scary.
it is scary.
And on the world stage, you were asking, in my opinion, I can't tell what is going to happen because I don't think we're heading in a good direction. And I don't see a resolve in the future, and that's scary to me.
Did you have something to say, Ginger? I saw you starting to say something. No. Oh, okay.
You know what this makes me think of? One of the scariest movies I ever saw was Devil's Advocate. And I don't know if y'all remember that, but it was just horrifying to me that this devil was taking over this young lawyer and his wife. And in the end, the young man is starting to do whatever the devil wants him to do, no matter how bad it is. If you've never seen the movie, you gotta watch it just because of the amazing storyline, but that I'm not telling very well. But in the end, what is happening is it's like Groundhog Day. Everything is repeating over and over again, and it gets worse and worse. And what the devil looks at the young man and says, pride is my favorite sin. And it makes me think of, pride goeth before the fall. It's just, look what's going on with Trump right now. All of this pride and everything that he has been creating and everything seems to be falling. And hopefully, but this was a lesson that my mother used to drive home with us, that you should never be prideful, and because things, when it goes before the fall, you will.
Well, one of the expressions my mother used to say was, "Don't ever get too big for your britches."
Yeah.
And that's. Have y'all ever heard that?
Yeah.
Don't get too big for your britches, because if you do, something's going to happen. You're going to be put in your place.
Yeah.
So that's kind of narcissistic thinking.
But do we put people in their place anymore? I don't know that we put people in their place anymore.
Well,
We are afraid.
we're afraid.
We are
You're
afraid of
exactly
doing-
right,
We are
Carol.
afraid of putting people in our
We're
place.
afraid.
We used to, but now we have to be so careful of everything we say and do, and then some people don't have to.
And you know what's so fearful to me? I'm very thankful that I'm not in the classroom right now.
Thank you, God.
Because these children are acting out. And back in the day, we would say, that's inappropriate. You mustn't talk like that. You mustn't act like that. Sometimes there was discipline. Sometimes it was just a matter of saying, you mustn't do that. That is inappropriate. Do you know that teachers can be sued for saying that now? I couldn't last one day in a classroom. And that above everything else, that is making me fearful for our future. Because what are we going to have running our country 20 years from now, 30 years from now? That's very scary. Very scary.
To the point, again, keep us on the larger scale, the way our government is set up is that the House of Representatives represents the people. We're all elected representatives from our area. The Senate represents the states, from each state, what the feeling of those people are. And again, going back to what Micah is talking about here and what happened to Omri and Ahab and the rest of them, how the kingdom falls from Assyria, and then even later on Babylon even takes down Judah, Jerusalem. So Samurai goes. When we look on the world stage and we put this, because the president represents the whole country to the rest of the world. And so when we let the people to say this is who we are on whichever level it is, we can, somebody talks about family values or whatever it is they talk about. That's one thing, but you really have to see what, and let me go to this. This goes straight to this point here. It's Matthew, I just looked it up in the meantime, doggone it. Matthew 5, here it is. Matthew 7, verse 15 to 20. Be on your guard against false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but underneath are wolves on the prowl. You will know them by their deeds. So if somebody says, we need to protect our borders so we are not taken over by outside influences, and then to do that, he rips babies from mother's arms. That's just one glaring instance. But that's only that man. All of us, when we elect our local representatives, even our commissioners, whatever it is, we need to be looking at the person. Even though it's very hard in today's society to find somebody like Liz Cheney, who I disagree with on a lot of stuff, but she is a person of integrity.
Correct.
High integrity.
High integrity
And the point is, she is not. Anyway, let me finish the quote here. You will know them by their deeds. Do you ever pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from prickly plants? Never. If he tells you he is for family values and he's doing something else, and again, because of the person who he is sounding his horn the loudest. He is the Pharisee in our country today who's tooting his horn about how wonderful he is and how strong our country is. And that's what we alluded to a minute ago when we were reading the other part of Matthew. I forget what verse and chapter it was, about don't be like the Pharisees on the temple steps and making a big to-do about all the wonderful things I'm doing. rather than what is actually being done. It says, never. Any sound tree bears good fruit, while a decayed tree bears bad fruit. A sound tree cannot bear bad fruit any more than a decayed tree can bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. You can tell a tree by its fruit. None of those who cry out, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of God, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. And if you're walking humbly with God, you are doing good. What's it do? Love, do good. I got good and right. Do justice and love mercy. Were the words we've been using. When the day comes, many will plead me, Lord, Lord, we have not prophesied your name. Have we not prophesied your name? Have we not exorcised demons by its power? We've not pointed out all these wrongdoers? Are we not, have we not proclaimed how wonderful we were doing your word? Did we not do many miracles in your name as well? Make a big, if you have plenty of means, you make a big show of, I gave this here and I gave that there. Then I will declare to them solemnly, and we don't want to be caught in this. I never knew you. Out of my sight, you evildoers. I want to leave with, you can say something to say. I will leave at that point, but I will be gone for the next 2 weeks, and someone else can pick this up. And where did I put it? Can we understand why we have a country-city divide in our country today? When you think of the people that looking at all the rich and the excess in Samaria, or in the northern kingdom, or in the south, in the Jerusalem kingdom, and they see we have nothing, but the opulence is there. Just leave with that. And
I think in order
so
to
I wanted to give Chip a chance to say what he wanted to say.
Yeah, well, just in general, you were talking about Congress and the president. And of course, Trump's greatest fear of being a loser. That's his word. I cannot be a loser. If he was ever a loser, and he was, but he doesn't accept it, his whole ego structure would fall apart. Might even commit suicide. But I have a feeling that most of these people that are elected and re-elected have never fallen flat on their face, had something terrible happen to them that made them change their perspective on life and become mature men. That you have to fail at something in order to mature. And I don't think a lot of these people I think they've been accumulating money so long. I mean, and it's so evident. I think.
Well, let's hope some of them can at least recognize the plight of so many. You're probably right, because in order to run for these offices, you have to be very wealthy. And so they haven't fallen. You're right. They haven't fallen and hit rock bottom. And then they're in there for life, it seems. But they need, if they're representing us, then they need to open their eyes and see what is happening. Then I don't think they would be so condemned, But all of this fluff and stuff, which is, Washington is fluff and stuff.
Chip, some of what you're saying reminds me of some recent devotions of Richard Rohr when he talked about suffering and love go hand in hand, and I think that's what you're
Yeah,
talking
well,
about.
I played that.
You have to suffer in order to understand what love is, according to him. Sorry.
Yeah, I admit I partially plagiarized. I glanced at one of these books.
I actually saw this on my Instagram the other day, and I thought I would share it with you guys. It's a really powerful statement, I think. It says, I was hungry, but you cut my food stamps. I was thirsty, but you prioritized corporations over my water supply. I was a stranger, but you said America first. I was sick, but you overcharged me for my health care. I was in prison, but it was profitable for you, so I stayed there. And whatever you do to the least of these people, you do unto me.
Yeah, point. Exactly.
Well, we've been talking about this negative. I think we need a little bit positive. What do you do in order to walk humbly?
Yeah, what do we do?
Try to look positive.
But we have to.
Well,
have to.
I only talk about this way to think a little bit larger, and it's funny how we keep coming back to Trump, and I keep trying to pull away from that and say, let's watch the local. Because,
Oh, my goodness.
yeah, because it's not a, you just have to beware of the false prophet. There will always be a leader, and even when he lost, how many people refused to accept it? When the Civil War ended, how many people didn't accept it? And to this day, we're paying for that. We have to, there is something in here too about good and evil need to exist together. I can't pull it up. I'm kind of a scatterbrained person, so I'll see these things, but I somehow even write down the wrong verse and it doesn't make sense. But there's something in there too that good and evil need to exist in the world together. There's something in one of these quotes.
John, talking about we need to keep our eyes open about the local situation. I will say very loudly, and I have spoken on Facebook with people who are commenting about this. I am very upset about what's happening right now today in our schools. I don't know what the answer is going forward. I don't pretend to be the one with all the answers. But the answer is not putting guns in schools. That is the scariest thing I have ever heard that the Madison County school system has done. And I am so fearful about what this could produce. The situation it would be awful. I mean, we could have a terrible situation because of this. And I believe in the sheriff, and I believe in the superintendent. I believe in the commissioners, but I think when there is an incident in a school, and I taught in this county for 34 years, you call the sheriff and say, look, we've got a situation here, get up here fast. They get up there. Our police in this county would get to the place and they would handle it. You don't leave it to school authorities. I don't care how much they're trained.
Well,
I don't care if the gun is locked up. It does not need to be in the school.
But that's another format of like the school board and getting the government as they have gotten into the police departments and the militarization.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's the answer.
But people aren't paying attention to it.
No.
There's in all the shootings,
Well,
the ones that have that.
The one thing I would caution though, again, about trying to find balance all the time, two sides of everything. You may not like something one person is doing, so you do what you say, make sure you call and do all the rest of it. You can't just go to the other guy. First you have to check out what he's doing. You know what I mean? When it comes time to vote. So you got to check them both out.
I believe in these people who are in these positions. I just don't like this latest thing they want to do. And I tell them to their face. I would tell them right to their face, I'm scared to death of what you're doing in the school system. But there again, I told you I wouldn't last one day in the school because I think it's okay to say,
well, you know what our
little Johnny, That is inappropriate.
What
I
are other
will not
schools
accept
doing
that.
though? They're putting in metal detectors. They're not putting in.
They've got officers in all the schools now. We didn't have officers when I was teaching. We didn't need officers. Teachers took care of it. And we didn't
So-
beat them. We didn't beat them.
As Shasta just read on that last thing.
Meanwhile, it's 115
Oh, but
degrees.
if somebody wants to do next Sunday, I'm gonna be gone for 2 Sundays.
I don't
There
want
was something else that I thought I would follow up